When you hear the name Nobel, what's the first thing you think of? I'm guessing it's prestige, genius, maybe even world peace. It's become the absolute gold standard for human achievement, right? But what if I told you that the whole thing, the world's most distinguished prize, was actually born from devastation, a mistaken obituary, and one man's desperate attempt to rewrite his own very dark history?
Just imagine for a second, waking up one morning, grabbing the newspaper, and reading that headline about yourself. This single sentence, folks, is the explosive secret right at the very heart of the Nobel Prize.
So you have to be asking, how on earth did we get here? How did the guy who created the Peace Prize get a nickname like that? Well, to really understand the prize, you first have to understand the man. And he was a man who lived a life of just staggering contradiction.
So let's meet him. This is Alfred Nobel. He was born in Sweden way back in 1833, and pretty much his entire life was a battle between two completely opposite identities. And it was this conflict that would ultimately define everything about his legacy.
On one hand, you've got Nobel, the brilliant scientist. He came from a family of engineers, had this amazing mind for chemistry, and invented some truly revolutionary technology. But then, there's this other side, the merchant of death, a man who made a fortune from the instruments of war, whose inventions led to mass destruction, and who was, frankly, on track to leave behind a legacy of pure devastation.
And this all really comes down to his most famous invention, something that literally, and I mean literally, changed the shape of the world: dynamite.
Now, before you jump to conclusions, dynamite was actually a huge leap forward for progress. It made these massive industrial projects, think mining, building tunnels through mountains, constructing canals, infinitely faster and way, way safer than they were before. Nobel really saw himself as a great inventor, someone pushing humanity forward.
But here's the thing, right? The very same power that made dynamite perfect for blasting through rock also made it a terrifyingly effective weapon of war. And Nobel profited from all of it. Which brings us to the moment that changed absolutely everything.
So get this, in 1888, Alfred Nobel experienced something that very few people ever will. He got to read his own obituary. And it was this shocking, completely life-altering event that forced him to stare his own public image right in the face.
And this wasn't some kind of youthful crisis, okay? Nobel was 55 years old. He had already built his entire career, his whole fortune. He was forced to confront his legacy late in life, with the clock ticking.
There it is again. A French newspaper had published it by mistake. See, it was Nobel's brother who had actually passed away. But the article? It didn't pull any punches. It just laid into Alfred, the inventor of dynamite. Can you even imagine the shock? Seeing your entire life's work summed up in just 3 devastating words?
This was so much more than just bad press. It was like a mirror was held up to his life, and it reflected an image that he just couldn't bear to look at. He realized that for all his scientific achievements, history was about to remember him as a villain. And that triggered this incredibly profound reevaluation of his whole life and its consequences. But Nobel didn't just fall into despair. He did something truly astonishing. He decided he was going to pick up the pen himself and rewrite the final chapter of his own story. He came up with this incredibly bold vision for the future.
And he absolutely put his money where his mouth was. In his final will, Nobel dedicated over 90% of his immense wealth. We're talking a staggering amount of money, not to his family, but to a completely new, radical idea. He was going to fund a brand new legacy.
And this was it. This was his legacy. He established 5 prizes to be awarded every year to the people who gave the greatest benefit to mankind. You have physics, chemistry, and medicine, all celebrating science and progress. Literature for the great works of the human spirit. And then, most importantly, most pointedly, a prize for peace. It was a direct rebuttal to that horrible nickname, the Merchant of Death.
So the big question is, did it work? Did this grand plan to completely reshape his legacy actually succeed?
Oh, the answer is an overwhelming yes. His vision was a stunning success, probably bigger than he ever could have imagined. Over the next 100+ years, the Nobel name was completely transformed. It was totally detached from dynamite and became the world's most famous symbol for human achievement and, the pursuit of a better world.
And this is the end result. Alfred Nobel's name isn't associated with destruction anymore. Not at all. Instead, it's remembered alongside the very people his prizes celebrate. People like Marie Curie, Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King Jr. His legacy is now forever tied to the greatest minds and peacemakers in modern history.
You know, the story of Alfred Nobel is an extreme example, for sure, but it leaves us with this really powerful question. He somehow pulled off one of the greatest legacy makeovers in history, turning a fortune made from dynamite into this enduring symbol of peace and progress. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What will our own legacies be, and how much power do we really have to shape them?